The first time Elias Verne realized the palace was too quiet, it was not because of sound, but because of the way the air seemed to hold its breath. The crystalline corridors of the Aurelian Spire glowed softly around him, walls alive with faint bioluminescent veins that pulsed like a sleeping heart. He had walked these halls for 3 standard cycles now, armored in matte human alloy, helmet clipped at his side, eyes forward, posture perfect. Human soldier, assigned bodyguard, sworn protector, alien princess, his charge, his commander by proxy, his impossible problem. Princess Salith of House Vera was not cruel, not kind in the simple ways humans understood. She was precise, curious, endlessly observant. Her people ruled by law woven into fate, ancient codes that bound emotion as tightly as action. Humans called it oppressive. Aliens called it necessary. Elias had learned quickly that survival here meant silence, restraint, and never asking why certain doors were closed, especially today. The chamber he guarded belonged to Salith alone, a sanctum layered with shimmering fabrics, floating data crystals, and artifacts taken from 100 conquered stars, treasures, priceless beyond calculation, left scattered openly across low pedestals and silken rests. Too openly, his training screamed at him that something was wrong. No princess left her vault unsealed. No ruler trusted temptation. Elias stood motionless at the threshold, boots aligned with the glowing inlay, breathing steady, heart not. His eyes traced the room without moving his head, cataloging risks, exits, reflections, and then he noticed it, the smallest object, almost nothing, a thin circlet of living metal resting on a cushion of pale light. He had seen it before, once, during a ceremony when Salith had worn it upon her brow, a royal binding crest, symbol of lineage, authority, and something more intimate. Touching it without sanction was forbidden, by alien law, by palace decree, by destiny itself. Elias swallowed, jaw tightening. He did not step forward. He told himself he would not, that his duty was clear, his loyalty unshakable, his discipline absolute. But the air shifted. The room pulsed warmer, softer, as if reacting to him, alien technology responding not to command, but to presence. His fingers flexed unconsciously. He hated himself for noticing how close the circlet was, for remembering how Salith's eyes had lingered on him during that ceremony, luminous and unreadable, for remembering how she had asked him later, in that calm melodic voice, what humans felt when entrusted with power they did not deserve. A test. He realized it too late. The princess had left the treasures not as carelessness, but as bait. For him, for the human soldier she watched more closely than any advisor. Elias took a single step inside, armor whispering against itself. The circlet did not move, but the light beneath it brightened, responding, inviting. His breath hitched, emotions warring behind his ribs, duty clawing against curiosity, loyalty against the unbearable weight of being seen. He did not touch it. He told himself that mattered. But alien law did not care for intent alone. The doors sealed without sound, light shifting from warm gold to deep imperial blue. Elias spun, hand dropping toward his sidearm, only to stop himself, knowing any hostile move would condemn him instantly. The room changed, walls rearranging with fluid grace, forming a semicircle behind him. She stepped from the shadows. Princess Salith, draped in flowing argent silk, skin glowing faintly, eyes like twin stars sharpened by judgment and something dangerously close to disappointment. Her presence pressed against him, not physically, but emotionally, an alien gravity that made his pulse thunder. "So," she said softly, each word precise, weighted, deliberate. The human soldier crossed the threshold. Elias lowered his head slightly, not submission, respect. "I did not touch anything, Your Highness," he said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. Her gaze flicked to the circlet, then back to him. "You entered," she replied. "In our law, entry is choice." Silence stretched between them, thick and electric. Elias felt exposed. every thought reflected in those luminous eyes. He realized then that this was never about theft. It was about trust, about fate. "What do you feel?" Salith asked quietly, stepping closer. Close enough that he could see the subtle patterns beneath her skin, shifting with her emotions. "When you stand among what is forbidden to you." He hesitated, knowing truth here was more dangerous than lies. "I feel," he said slowly, "that I was never meant to belong, but I would still choose to protect." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, conflict, resolve. The circlet pulsed once, sharply, reacting to his words. Beyond the sealed walls, distant alarms began to rise, muted but unmistakable. Warship alerts, law enforcement vectors, the machinery of fate grinding awake. Salith turned toward the ceiling, jaw tightening. "They are coming sooner than expected," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Elias followed her gaze, heart sinking as the implications settled. This test had consequences beyond a private judgment. Galactic law had noticed, and it would not be merciful. Behind them, the circlet lifted slowly from its cushion, suspended between them like a verdict yet unspoken. Elias understood then that whatever choice came next would bind them both. Human and alien, soldier and princess, caught at the edge of a destiny that had already begun to move. The alarms never grew loud. They did not need to. They vibrated through the palace like a warning carried in bone and breath. A low hum that made the bioluminescent walls dim and sharpen at the same time. Elias felt it in his chest first, the way he had learned to feel incoming artillery before sensors confirmed it. Princess Salith did not look afraid, but the patterns beneath her skin shifted faster now, light breaking and reforming like fractured starlight. "The law has marked the chamber," she said quietly. "Observation protocols are active." Elias's mind raced, training overlaying instinct. Observation meant judgment. Judgment meant no mercy. The circlet hovered between them, rotating slowly, its living metal reshaping itself as if tasting the air. He resisted the urge to step back, knowing retreat would read as guilt. Standing still felt like standing on the edge of an airlock. "I did not know," Elias said, words chosen carefully, not to defend himself, but to anchor the moment. "That knowledge is irrelevant," Salith replied, her voice softer now, almost regretful. "Our law values awareness of choice, not awareness of outcome." She moved past him, her presence brushing against his armor like heat through glass. Elias turned with her, never letting his attention drift. Outside the chamber, he knew security constructs were aligning, warship transponders locking the spire into a legal containment shell. All of it for a single step. "You planned this," Elias said quietly, not accusation, understanding. "Yes," Salith answered without hesitation. "I needed to know what kind of human the council placed at my side." He felt something twist in him then, not anger, but a deeper ache. "Was I meant to fail?" he asked. She stopped, back to him, shoulders tense. "No," she said. "You were meant to reveal yourself." The chamber trembled slightly as distant engines engaged. Not weapons yet, but authority. Elias had faced battlefields where death fell like rain, but this felt worse. There was no enemy to strike, no line to hold, only invisible rules closing in. Salith turned to face him again, her eyes searching his face as if committing it to memory. "Human soldiers are strange," she said. "You carry loyalty like a wound." Elias exhaled slowly, grounding himself. "Where I come from," he replied. "Trust is the only thing that survives war." For a moment, the circlet pulsed brighter, responding not to proximity now, but to resonance. Salith's breath caught, just slightly, a tell no one else would have noticed. "That artifact," she said, voice lowering, "it binds intent to fate. It cannot be fooled." "And what does it see now?" Elias asked. She hesitated, and that hesitation frightened him more than alarms ever could. "It sees a convergence," she admitted. A human will acting without claim, and an alien law unprepared to judge it. The walls shifted again, forming a narrow corridor of light toward the far exit. Come, Salith said suddenly, urgency sharpening her tone. If the council arrives while you remain here, they will take you. Elias did not move immediately, surprise flickering across his disciplined calm. Take me where? He asked. To trial, she answered, and then to erasure. That word landed heavier than execution. Erasure meant no record, no memory, no legacy. A soldier reduced to a corrected anomaly. Elias stepped forward without thinking, placing himself between Salith and the hovering circlet. Instinct overriding protocol. If someone must answer, he said firmly, let it be me. Her eyes widened, alien pupils dilating, light beneath her skin flaring bright and erratic. You would accept annihilation, she whispered, for a law not your own. For a choice I made, Elias replied, for someone I swore to protect. Something broke then, quietly, invisibly, not glass, not metal, but certainty. Salith reached out, stopping just short of touching his armor, her hand trembling. No human has ever spoken to me like that, she said, and no princess is permitted to feel what I feel now. Outside, the first warship shadows passed over the spire, light dimming as massive hulls slid into orbital alignment. Legal sigils flared across the ceiling, ancient symbols asserting dominance over flesh and thought alike. Salith's jaw tightened, resolve hardening through the conflict. There is one path, she said. It is forbidden. Elias met her gaze without hesitation. I am already beyond permission. The circlet suddenly snapped toward him, stopping a breath away from his chest, metal reshaping rapidly, responding to his presence with unmistakable intent. Salith gasped, stepping back as if struck. It has chosen you, she said, awe and fear entwined. Before Elias could respond, the palace shook more violently, containment fields locking fully into place. The council had arrived. Salith straightened, princess again, power settling over her like a mantle. Whatever happens next, she said quietly, know that destiny is no longer alone. The corridor of light began to close, seconds slipping away. Elias understood then that his life had already split into before and after, and the warships outside were only the beginning. The corridor sealed behind them with a soft finality that felt louder than any blast. Light narrowed, colors deepening into shades Elias had no names for, hues that seemed to carry memory rather than spectrum. The palace no longer felt like a place of residence. It felt like a living witness. Salith walked ahead of him, posture composed, steps measured. Yet the glow beneath her skin betrayed her unrest, patterns blooming and collapsing like thoughts she refused to voice. Elias followed half a pace behind, as he always did, but the space between them felt charged now, altered, not master and guard, not princess and soldier, something undefined and dangerous. The circlet drifted alongside them, silent, obedient to no command Elias could see. It mirrored his pace, adjusted its height to his breathing. Every instinct screamed that he should push it away, create distance, break whatever unseen bond had formed. Instead, he endured it the same way he had endured fire and vacuum and orders that never loved him back. They will sense it, Salith said softly, breaking the silence without turning. The council does not need eyes to know when fate shifts. Elias nodded, though she could not see it. I have been tracked by worse, he replied. Her lips curved faintly. Not quite a smile, not quite sorrow. You still believe this is a hunt, she said. It is not. They entered a chamber Elias had never seen before, walls curved and seamless, etched with symbols that moved when he was not looking directly at them. The air was cooler here, heavier, as if gravity itself had been tuned for contemplation rather than comfort. At the center stood a pool of liquid light, its surface reflecting stars that did not exist above them. This place is older than the spire, Salith said, voice reverent despite herself. It predates our empire, our laws, even our fear of them. Elias slowed, senses sharpening. What is it? He asked. A listening chamber, she answered, where choices echo longer than lives. The circlet drifted forward, hovering above the luminous pool, its metal surface unraveling into finer strands. Elias felt a pressure behind his eyes, memories stirring unbidden, Earth skies torn by orbital fire, comrades laughing before they were names on walls, the quiet promise he had made to himself to protect something that mattered someday. Salith stopped beside him now, closer than she had ever allowed before. Her voice lowered, almost fragile. The circlet responds to intent shaped by loss, she said. It was never meant for humans. Then why me? Elias asked, the question escaping before caution could stop it. She turned to him fully, eyes luminous, searching. Because you carry grief without bitterness, she replied. And that terrifies my people. The pool of light rippled, images forming and dissolving too quickly to grasp. Elias felt exposed, not just observed, but understood. Alien presence brushed against his thoughts, not invading, but resonating. He clenched his fists, grounding himself in the physical, the solid certainty of armor and muscle and breath. Salith sensed it, her glow dimming slightly. I will not look deeper, she promised. Not without consent. That alone told him how sacred this moment was. Consent, choice, words her law barely recognized. Salith, Elias said quietly, using her name without title for the first time. If this ends with my erasure, I need to know. He paused, choosing honesty over safety. Was I ever just a test to you? Her breath hitched, the patterns beneath her skin shattering into chaotic light before slowly reforming. No, she said, too quickly, then softer, truer. I told myself you were. Outside the chamber, reality shifted, the distant vibration of warships intensifying. Elias could feel them now, immense structures bending space with their mass, legal constructs woven into hulls and cannons alike. Not weapons of conquest, weapons of compliance. They will arrive in moments, Salith said, voice steadying as resolve took hold. When they do, they will demand the circlet. And you, Elias added. Yes, she agreed, and you will be judged as an influence. The circlet pulsed sharply, reacting to the word influence. Elias met Salith's gaze, something unspoken passing between them. If they take it, he said slowly, what happens to you? Her eyes darkened, stars dimming. I will be corrected, she replied, stripped of succession, bound into silence. Anger flared in Elias then, hot and sudden, cutting through his discipline. For asking a question, he said. For seeing, she corrected gently. The pool of light surged upward suddenly, forming a lattice of glowing threads around them, ancient mechanisms awakening, responding not to authority codes, but to emotional convergence. Salith stiffened, realization dawning. It has begun, she whispered. Tell me what that means, Elias demanded, stepping closer instinctively. It means, she said, voice trembling despite herself, that the chamber has recognized a divergence. The walls brightened, symbols locking into new patterns, unfamiliar even to her. Elias felt a strange calm settle over him, the kind that came before impossible odds. Then we stand, he said simply. Salith looked at him then, truly looked, not as a subject or a soldier, but as something equal, something chosen. Human, she said softly. You do not understand what you are becoming. Neither do you, Elias replied. Above them, the first council signature pierced the chamber's defenses, light slicing downward like judgment made manifest. The circlet flared between them, brighter than ever, and in that blinding moment, Elias understood that whatever the aliens called law, something older had just decided otherwise. The light did not strike them like a weapon. It wrapped around them like a question that refused to be ignored. The council signature fractured as it touched the lattice, splitting into threads that recoiled as if burned. Salith staggered, eyes wide, glow beneath her skin surging violently. "That is not possible," she whispered. "The chamber has never rejected the council." Elias felt the force pass through him, not painful but intimate, as if something ancient had brushed his spine and paused to listen. The circlet tore itself apart midair, unfolding into a ring of floating sigils that rotated around his chest. His armor hummed, systems flaring and failing at once, human technology suddenly insufficient in the presence of something older than stars. Salith dropped to one knee, not in submission but shock. Her breath came fast, patterns beneath her skin spiraling into shapes Elias had never seen before. "Those markings," she said, staring at the sigils orbiting him. "They are not royal." The chamber trembled again, harder this time. Outside, warship engines roared openly now, authority shedding subtlety. A voice thundered through the spire, layered and resonant. Not spoken but imposed. "Princess Salith of House Vera, you are commanded to disengage." Elias stepped forward without thinking, placing himself between Salith and the descending light. "Stay behind me," he said, instinctively, stupidly. She looked up at him, disbelief and something far deeper colliding in her eyes. "You cannot shield me from law," she said. "I have done worse," he replied quietly. The sigils flared brighter, reacting to his intent. The voice hesitated, just for a fraction of a breath, and in that hesitation, the truth emerged. Salith's gaze snapped back to the symbols, recognition dawning with horror. "No," she breathed. "That is not binding script. That is selection." The chamber responded to her realization, the pool of light collapsing inward and then erupting upward in a pillar of brilliance. Images flooded the air, not projections but memories, not hers, not his, but something vast and collective. Elias saw civilizations rising and falling, alien empires extinguished by their own laws, stars darkened by obedience mistaken for order. He felt a presence behind it all, watching, waiting, intervening only when stagnation threatened existence itself. Salith pressed her hand to her chest, voice shaking. "The circlet was never a royal artifact," she said. "It was a filter." The council voice returned, sharper now, strained. "Princess, step away from the human. He has triggered a prohibited legacy." Elias turned slowly, confusion giving way to dread. "Legacy of what?" he asked. Salith rose unsteadily to her feet, eyes locked on him with a mixture of awe and fear. "Of correction," she said. "Of disruption. Of balance." The sigils around Elias suddenly locked into alignment, forming a symbol so old it bypassed language. The chamber answered with a low harmonic tone that made the walls glow white. The warships outside faltered, formation destabilizing as if something had reached out and grasped their momentum. The voice fractured, multiplied, council minds linking in alarm. "This is impossible," they echoed. The arbiter line was extinguished. Salith inhaled sharply, realization striking her fully now. "The arbiter was never a species," she said, voice trembling with revelation. "It was a role." Elias felt it then, a shift inside him, not power flooding his veins, but clarity, a sense of standing at the exact point where countless choices had once failed. "I am not a ruler," he said quietly. "I am a soldier." "Yes," Salith replied, stepping to his side despite the command to retreat. "That is why it chose you." The chamber convulsed as the pool of light vanished entirely, its energy pouring into the sigils around Elias. Human armor cracked, not breaking, but reshaping, adapting, not weaponized, not glorified, anchored. The council voice screamed now, stripped of its calm authority. "Terminate the human." Weapons powered across the warships, space itself tightening as targeting solutions aligned. Salith looked at Elias, terror and resolve burning equally bright. If they fire, she said, this spire will fall. Elias closed his eyes briefly, grounding himself in breath, in memory, in the promise he had made long before this palace, long before this princess, to protect what mattered. When he opened them, the sigils responded instantly. Space bent, not violently but decisively. The warships froze, engines locked, weapons silenced mid-charge, law suspended. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Salith could not breathe for a heartbeat. Elias lowered his hand slowly, realizing only then that he had raised it. I did not mean to do that, he said, voice rough. Salith laughed once, sharp and breathless, a sound torn free by relief and fear. That, she said softly, is exactly what the Arbiter does. The council fell silent, connection severed. Outside, the warships drifted powerless, awaiting judgment they no longer controlled. Salith turned to Elias fully, eyes luminous with something no law could bind now. You were never my bodyguard, she said. You were sent here because fate could not afford to wait any longer. Elias met her gaze, heart pounding with the weight of what had just changed. Then this was never a test, he said. No, Salith replied, reaching out and finally touching his armor, fingers trembling. It was an awakening. The silence did not last, it never did on a galactic scale. Where law fractured, fear rushed in to fill the gap. Across the orbital plane, the frozen warships began to light up with emergency signals. Not weapons but distress beacons, ancient and modern overlapping in chaotic patterns. The Arbiter's touch had not only stopped them, it had exposed them. Every system bound by imperial law felt the interruption ripple outward like a gravitational shock. Elias felt it before he saw it, a pressure spreading beyond the spire, beyond the planet itself. Not power leaving him, but attention turning toward him. Whole civilizations pausing mid-motion, sensing that something foundational had shifted. Salith stepped closer, her hand still resting against his armor as if to anchor herself in something real. You do not understand what you have done, she said softly, voice trembling despite her control. Elias exhaled slowly, eyes still fixed on the drifting warships outside the transparent arc of the chamber. I stopped them, he replied. For now. The chamber shuddered again, not from the spire this time, but from space itself. Distant stars flickered, their light bending unnaturally as massive vessels tore into real space. Not imperial warships, something older, darker, marked with sigils Elias now recognized instinctively. Independent enforcers, free fleets, species long suppressed by the same laws he had just suspended. They felt it, Salith whispered, awe and dread intertwining. The Arbiter's return. The walls filled with incoming data streams as the palace systems struggled to keep up. Elias saw fragments of it reflected in the light, border worlds erupting into open revolt, council seats going dark, entire legal frameworks collapsing as automated compliance systems shut down without arbiter validation. This was meant to be controlled, Salith said, her glow shifting into sharp, fractured patterns. The arbiter was supposed to appear once in 1,000 cycles. Not now, not like this. Elias turned to her, grounding himself in her presence before the scale overwhelmed him. You said it was a role, he said. Then tell me what happens next. Her eyes met his, luminous and unguarded. Next, she said quietly, every empire that survives by obedience will try to kill you. As if summoned by the truth of her words, space screamed. A new fleet emerged far closer than the others. Black-hulled ships bearing the crest of the High Continuum, the deepest arm of imperial law. These were not warships meant to intimidate. They were designed to erase. Salith's breath caught. They should not be able to move, she whispered. They are shielded against arbitration. Elias felt the sigils around him tighten, reacting not with strength, but with warning. For the first time since the awakening, resistance pushed back. Not force, structure. They adapted, Elias murmured. understanding dawning with cold clarity. They planned for this. The lead Continuum vessel powered its forward arrays, not weapons but codex emitters, law made manifest, rewritten in beams of absolute definition. If it struck him, he would not die. He would be rewritten. Salith stepped in front of him without thinking, arms spread. "I will not allow it," she said fiercely. Elias caught her shoulders gently, pulling her back despite her protest. "This is bigger than us," he said, voice steady. "And that is exactly why you must live." Her eyes filled with light, emotion tearing through her composure. "You speak like someone already preparing to disappear," she whispered. Before he could answer, the chamber darkened, not from power loss, from intrusion. A presence entered without permission, without ceremony. The air itself folded inward, revealing a figure made not of flesh, but layered light and shadow. Ancient, vast, restrained only by purpose. Salith fell to one knee instantly, shock and reverence crashing together. "A watcher," she breathed. "One of the first bound." Elias did not kneel, not out of defiance, but because something in him recognized the being as equal. The sigils responded, stabilizing. The watcher turned toward him, countless eyes focusing into one. "You were not expected," it said, voice echoing inside his thoughts rather than his ears. The probability was negligible. Elias met its gaze, heart pounding. "War makes a habit of breaking probabilities," he replied. The watcher paused, a ripple of something like amusement passing through its form. "The Continuum is mobilizing full suppression," it warned. "If they succeed, the arbiter line ends forever." "And if they fail?" Elias asked. The being's light dimmed. "Then the galaxy will burn before it learns how to choose." Outside, the Continuum fleet fired, beams of codified law tearing through space toward the spire. Salith cried out as the palace shields screamed under the impact. Entire cities across the Empire lost power as systems tied to the spire destabilized. Trade routes collapsed. Defense grids went blind. Elias felt the cost mounting, every intervention echoing outward with consequences he could not yet measure. This was not a battle for one world. It was a reckoning for everything built on fear of disorder. He stepped forward, sigils flaring brilliantly around him. "Then we do not win by force," he said quietly. "We survive by making them see." Salith stared at him, fear and faith warring in her eyes. "See what?" she asked. Elias looked out at the burning lines of conflict spreading across the stars. "At what happens," he said, "when law forgets the lives it was meant to protect." As the next wave of attacks tore toward them and the galaxy tilted toward open war, Elias understood with painful certainty. The Arbiter was no longer a myth, and the price of his awakening would be measured in worlds. The beams did not slow. They multiplied, tearing luminous scars through the dark as if space itself were being rewritten line by line. The spire groaned beneath the impact, ancient structures straining as shields flickered between existence and collapse. Elias felt each strike echo through him, not as pain, but as weight, every life balanced on decisions he had never asked to make. Salith stood beside him now, no longer hiding the storm beneath her skin, light surging in erratic waves that mirrored the chaos beyond the walls. "Whole systems are falling silent," she said, voice breaking despite her effort to stay composed. "Planets that depended on imperial stability are losing power, food, defense." Elias closed his eyes for a heartbeat, memories flooding in unbidden. Human colonies abandoned after treaties failed. Civilians waiting for help that never came. The quiet look soldiers shared when they knew they were too late. "I never wanted this," he said quietly. The Watcher hovered nearby, its form dimming as if even it felt the strain of what was unfolding. "Intent is irrelevant now," it replied. "Choice is everything." The Continuum fleet adjusted formation, beams converging into a single focused lattice aimed directly at the heart of the spire. This was not suppression. This was finality, Salith reached for Elias's hand, fingers warm against his armor, grounding him. "If that strikes," she said softly, "this world dies." Elias looked at her then, truly looked, not as a princess or symbol, but as someone who had chosen to stand with him when obedience would have saved her. "You trusted me," he said. She nodded once, eyes shining. "Even when my law told me not to." The sigils around Elias began to fracture, not failing but changing, responding to something deeper than command or instinct. Emotion, connection. The Watcher's voice softened, losing its distant resonance. "The Arbiter was never meant to stand alone," it said. "It was meant to listen." Elias felt that truth settle into him like a missing piece finally locking into place. All this time he had tried to carry the galaxy on his shoulders. But soldiers did not win wars alone. They survived because others stood with them. "Then help me," he said, not to the Watcher but to Salith, to everyone who still believes law can protect instead of control. Salith stepped forward, lifting her chin, princess and rebel and believer all at once. "There are worlds watching," she said, voice carrying far beyond the chamber. "Worlds that have waited generations to be heard." As if summoned by her words, signals broke through the continuum, jamming. Faint at first, then growing stronger. Voices, requests, defiance. Free fleets altered course, placing themselves between imperial beams and civilian worlds. Suppressed species activated ancient defense grids long forbidden by law. Even within the Empire, governors hesitated, refusing orders they could no longer justify. The continuum responded with fury. More ships tore into real space, weapons charging indiscriminately now. If they could not control the galaxy, they would burn it clean. The Spire's shields finally failed, light shattering like glass. Shockwaves rippled through the chamber, throwing Elias to one knee. Salith cried out as she fell beside him, the glow beneath her skin dimming dangerously. "Salith?" Elias breathed, catching her before she hit the floor. She looked up at him, eyes flickering but determined. "I am still here," she whispered. "So are you." He pulled her close for a brief moment, forehead touching hers, a human gesture, simple, forbidden, powerful. "I will not let them erase you," he said, voice raw. "And I will not let them decide the galaxy's fate alone." The sigils responded violently, flaring with blinding intensity, not as weapons, but as mirrors. Across the continuum fleet, systems overloaded as every recorded law, every enforced correction, every erased culture reflected back into their own networks. Truth weaponized not to destroy, but to confront. The Watcher recoiled, light flickering wildly. "You are accelerating convergence," it warned. "This level of exposure could shatter the Arbiter entirely." Elias held Salith tighter, feeling her heartbeat steady against his chest. "Then let it break," he said, "if it means something better can stand in its place." The central continuum vessel began to tear itself apart internally, codex arrays collapsing under the weight of contradictions they could no longer suppress. Command voices screamed across open channels. No longer authoritative, only afraid. Salith lifted her hand weakly, placing it over Elias's heart. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "you changed me." He swallowed hard, emotion surging dangerously close to breaking his focus. "You changed me first," he replied. Outside, the stars themselves seemed to pause, light bending inward as if the galaxy were holding its breath. The final continuum beam charged, unstable, overloaded. One last attempt to impose silence. Elias rose slowly to his feet, Salith beside him, the Watcher hovering uncertainly behind. He looked out at the chaos, at the lives trembling on the edge of annihilation. And for the first time since this began, he did not feel alone. He reached outward, not with force, but with invitation, a choice offered instead of imposed. The sigils blazed white, then vanished, and the Arbiter, human and alien and something more, stepped into the moment where everything would either end or finally begin. The light did not explode. It softened, spreading outward like dawn touching a battlefield after the last shot is fired. The final continuum beam unraveled before it could strike, its rigid structure dissolving into harmless strands that faded into the dark. Across the stars, weapons powered down not by command, but by hesitation. Elias felt the moment settle into stillness, not silence born of fear, but of decision. The galaxy had been offered a choice, and for the first time in ages it had paused to consider it. Salith stood beside him, weakened but unbroken. Her glow steady now, no longer chaotic. She looked out at the stars with tears gathering in her luminous eyes, unashamed, unhidden. "They are listening," she whispered. "Yes," Elias replied softly, "and that may be the most dangerous thing of all." The Watcher drifted closer, its immense presence dimmed, humbled by what it had witnessed. "The Arbiter line has changed," it said, voice quieter, almost reverent. "No longer a correction, but a covenant." Those words echoed through Elias, not as a title, but as a weight he chose to accept. "I am still a soldier," he said, grounding himself in the truth of who he was, "and soldiers do not rule." Salith turned to him then, her hand finding his, fingers interlacing without hesitation, without permission. "Then stand with me," she said, voice steady with purpose. "Not above, not below, but beside." Beyond the spire, fleets repositioned, not into lines of domination, but into fragile formations of mutual defense. Worlds long silenced open channels, voices trembling as they spoke their own truths into the open. Empires faltered, not collapsing into chaos, but reshaping under the strain of accountability. Elias felt the Arbiter's presence within him settle, no longer demanding, no longer overwhelming. It was not power, it was responsibility shared. The Watcher inclined itself slightly, an ancient gesture of acknowledgement. "We will withdraw," it said. "The galaxy must now learn without us." As it faded, Elias felt no loss, only relief. Gods and Watchers were never meant to stay. Only people were. The spire systems stabilized slowly, damaged but alive. Across the Empire, council chambers filled with voices arguing not about enforcement, but about repair. The law would not vanish, but it would no longer stand alone. Salith leaned into Elias's side, exhaustion finally claiming its due. "I was raised to believe destiny was a cage," she said quietly. "Something inherited, unavoidable." Elias rested his forehead against hers, the human warmth grounding them both. "Where I come from," he replied, "destiny is just a direction. You still have to walk it." She smiled then, truly smiled, light blooming beneath her skin in gentle patterns Elias knew now mirrored peace. "Then walk with me," she said. Time passed, not marked by alarms or battles, but by rebuilding. The continuum withdrew its fleets, fractured but alive, forced to answer for what it had been. Former subjects became partners, not equals overnight, but participants at last. Elias refused crowns, refused titles, refused anything that placed him above choice. He remained what he had always been, a human soldier. Salith reclaimed her place not as a ruler bound by law, but as a leader accountable to those she served. An alien princess no longer defined by inheritance alone. Together, they stood before a galaxy learning to breathe without chains. Their bond whispered across cultures and species, a reminder that trust could exist even where fear once ruled. On the day the last Imperial warship departed the system, Elias and Salith stood on the spire's highest balcony, watching stars glitter unafraid. "You changed fate," Salith said softly. Elias shook his head. "No," he replied. "We chose it." The circlet, reforged and quiet now, rested between them, no longer a test, no longer a verdict, only a symbol of a moment when a human stepped forward, and an alien listened. Far across the galaxy, histories would record the fall of an age. But here, in the quiet between heartbeats, a soldier and a princess simply stood together, not bound by law, not driven by war, but guided by the fragile, powerful promise that destiny belonged to those brave enough to choose it.